Hey, greetings, everyone.
Okay.
Welcome to our study group for today. Thank you for being here. We're going to be picking up right where we left off from last week, which will be the fourth part of lesson 57. But before we do that, we are going to take a moment just to go quiet, go into that quiet center. So if you'd like to mute yourselves, yes, and if you're comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. And take some nice slow breaths just to help center in. Taking these moments to reconnect with the guru within, who's always there, always patiently waiting. And giving this gift to ourselves as we have a moment to and think to, as the Course encourages us to do often throughout our day. I like to read from the section from the text. I need do nothing. To do nothing is to rest and make a place within you where the activity of the body ceases to demand attention. Into this place, the Holy Spirit comes and there abides. He will remain when you forget, and the body's activities return to occupy your conscious mind. Yet there will always be this place of rest to which you can return. And you will be more aware of this quiet center of the storm than all its raging activity. This quiet center in which you do nothing will remain with you, giving you rest in the midst of every busy doing on which you are sent. For from this center will you be directed how to use the body sinlessly. Just enjoy this space. Enjoy this moment you're giving yourself. And I always like to remember before I leave the quiet center that we were given the truly helpful prayer to really help guide us in that whole using the body sinlessly thing. So before we return to our meeting, we can remind ourselves that we are here only to be truly helpful. We are here to represent Him who sent us. We do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because He who sent us will direct us. We are content to be wherever He wishes, knowing He goes there with us. We will be healed as we let Him teach us to heal. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and rejoin the space with your brothers and sisters of Christ. And we are, as I said, picking right back up where we left off. We left off lesson 57 review, and we are on the fourth lesson of that review. So I'm going to share screen. Before I do, I just want to check and see, Derek, I assume you would prefer to not be called on. Yep. Anybody else, would you prefer to not be called on to read? Or are we all okay with it if I call on you? All right. Well then, let's share screen. Okay, Derek, can you just give me a thumbs up if you see that? Thank you. And we're starting here with lesson 34. I could see peace instead of this. Andrew, do you mind reading?
Not at all. I could see peace instead of this. When I see the world as a place of freedom, I realize that it reflects the laws of God instead of the rules I made up for it to obey. I will understand that peace, not war, abides in it, and I will perceive that peace also abides in the hearts of all who share this place with me. this is like a reminder that the world that we see is not the real world. It's a dream, and we live in God, which is not a place, but a beingness. That's how I interpret this.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for reading and for sharing your thoughts on that. Yeah, when I see the world as a place of freedom, right? And you're acknowledging the connection to all the conversations we've had about how this world we think we're seeing is really not then that world. Thank you for getting us started. Anybody else have any thoughts or anything they'd like to add about this part of the lesson or about what Andrew said? Robert, I see I don't know if that's intended to be a hand raise or if you were just clapping.
Yes, it's a hand raise.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
What did I do? Select the wrong one?
Yeah, you selected the applause reaction.
I see my mistake. Yeah, I see.
It still caught my attention though, so it worked.
Yeah, okay, very good. I just wanted to say this idea of a place of freedom, this kind of hit me as a student of A Course in Miracles and Edgar Cayce for many years, Edgar Cayce, and then the Course has kind of taken over. But this whole idea that this world is a place of freedom, it is referring to the freedom of choice that we have in this world, that we have this power of decision, between the Holy Spirit and the ego, and that will determine whether I see peace or not, what choice I make. But the Edgar Cayce part is that supposedly while the mind is using the body here on the planet Earth, that our ability to change in very good ways is much broader than it is when we're in other dimensions, of experience. And so to me, the phrase, a place of freedom, thinking of the world as a place of freedom, it's like, really? It's a place of freedom. And so anyway, it just hit me that way. It just reminded me of that. And of course, he is referring to our freedom of choice that we do have here, as opposed to the freedom to create, which he talks about also. But anyway, I thought I would share that, which is something that came up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I really like that you remind us all that there's that freedom to choose, and that very much is our freedom here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. And Derek has his hand raised.
Yeah, I needed to hear that because what I'm experiencing today is, I'm feeling, angry. I'm feeling kind of victimized by being alive, if you will. It's my birthday, and instead of being happy that it's my birthday, I'm experiencing this judgment that I've had my whole life, as long as I can remember, which was sort of like, why should we celebrate birthdays? Who would want to come here and experience this physical pain, but also experience all the, bad things in the world? So I've had that judgment in the back of my mind forever. And even though I've been clearing and forgiving a lot of that over the decades, today I'm noticing that I just woke up feeling like, my 18-year-old self who is just angry that I'm here in this dream reality in this school, experiencing this pain that I'm actually feeling today. Fibromyalgia pain is flaring up. So this discussion right now and the reminder of the freedom of choice, and it's what I need. So I just wanted to share that with the group, because I'm sitting here feeling all grumbly.
Well, thank you for sharing it, because it's certainly relatable. I'm sure I do not speak only for myself when I say that. But yeah, it is You know, when you're talking about this being kind of like an old program, right? That's been running in the computer that is Derek for a long time. Yeah. And it's those old programs, I guess they die hard.
Yeah.
You know, I feel inclined just to share too that I just recently had a birthday as well, just over a week ago. And I was talking to Matt McCabe, actually, Miracle Voices, Matt McCabe, for those of you who know. And I was telling him about how I have a tradition 10 years in the making now of celebrating my entire birthday month. And this came out of first having a childhood in which I felt very much what you were just expressing, Derek. Like, why would we celebrate birthdays? This place is awful. Everything's awful. I'm not celebrating anything. And my family system really just didn't celebrate people or their birthdays or anything. So that was pretty well ingrained in me. And when I was in my 20s, I worked with a woman who was a big advocate for celebrate your birthday. I mean, she was like, celebrate the whole birthday week. And then she'd be like, I mean, if your birthday's on the weekend, I think celebrate the week leading up to it and the week after it. Like, why not? Celebrate yourself. You deserve it. And at first I was really kind of put off by this sentiment. I really didn't like it. Course was in my life already at that point, but I just wasn't interested in that. But after a few years of working with her, it actually really kind of started to, I guess, get in there. And I started thinking like, yeah, why wouldn't I allow myself to celebrate myself and like try to enjoy things when I can? Kind of think about Gary Renard too, talking about, you know, forgive when there's something to forgive. And if there isn't, just celebrate. So I decided the year I was turning 30 that I was going to celebrate my whole birthday month because I was like, I'm going to take it above and beyond. I'm going to do the whole month. And then I liked it so much. I've done it every year since then. And I shared it with Matt and he was like, I'm going to do it now too. He mentioned Gary also. So Gary said to celebrate whenever there's nothing to forgive. So he took it to that same place as well. But yeah, I can certainly relate to having that program in the past of kind of like nihilistic. Right? Like, what's the point?
Very much so.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you again for the honesty. And we have some new folks have joined us. So hello to Marguerite and Ardith. And we are, if you're curious, on lesson 57, about to move into part 5. Any other thoughts or anything anyone would like to share about part 4 before we do that? All right. Well, I will share screen again. Okay. So moving on to part 5 here. My mind is part of God's. I am very holy. Susan, do you mind reading?
Happy to. 35. My mind is part of God's. I am very holy. As I share the peace of the world with my brothers, I begin to understand that this peace comes from deep within myself. The world I look upon has taken on the light of my forgiveness and shines forgiveness back at me. In this light, I begin to see what my illusions about myself kept hidden. I begin to understand the holiness of all living things, including myself and their oneness with me.
Thank you for reading, Susan. Do you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to share about that?
Well, I'm thinking about the animals, the last line there of all living things. All sorts of animals, not just domesticated, beloved family pets, but all the chipmunk that hops across the yard, or, the whole animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking about the holiness in them as well.
Yeah. And wondering about awareness and consciousness, and where is that? Is there a line of delineation or not?
Mm-hmm. This is a thing that I think probably I relate to that very strongly, wondering like what my little doggy back there like thinks or feels, or does she think or feel? Right? Yeah. Yeah, it's a good. I know that there's some teachers and there's some people that speak to this. I don't believe the course really speaks to that for us, but someone else, if they know, will chime in, I am sure.
Since the holiness of all living things is referenced, I guess the definition is what's living, what's a thing, what's living, and what's a thing. Ardith, where are you?
Artist
I'm
is
here.
the
I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, I need your help. I need your help.
Yes. What's that?
The holiness of all living things. I'm looking for insight on all living things. Like when I read that line, I thought of the entire animal kingdom, and I then started thinking about the is there a line of delineation on consciousness or awareness among all living things, since the text went out of its way to, the lesson went out of its way to specify all living things.
Well, my first thought about that is that I interpret, when I see the word holiness, and I come from a Christian background, I've translated it into wholeness, which would also kind of be like oneness, the oneness of all things, which is what this is all about. And I would say, for my own feeling about that awareness is awareness. The animals would have to go into, I don't go into plants, we'll say with the animals for right now, but what Maggie just said about the dog, wondering whether the dog was thinking or what, I don't really think that animals think that way, the way we do, where they don't verbalize anyway in words. And so they must be in a form of awareness that, and we can see that. Sometimes you'll see a cat sit in the middle of the floor and be looking up at something. You can't see it, you have no clue, but they are absolutely concentrated on something they see. And I think if we think of it that way, that we're all in holiness, in wholeness, in oneness, in all living things, and then we can bring in the plants and all the other things into the picture too, that it's not excluded. It's all one. And how that translates in non-human, quote, human terms, we won't know until we're actually part of that light full bore, I don't think. In the meanwhile, it is faith and trust. I think it gives us a little bit better of an idea of how much we are loved, actually, because there's nothing excluded, absolutely nothing excluded. Just because we don't understand it, I think the more trust we put in it, the more beauty that we'll find. It'll touch our hearts. That's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like we called upon the ambassador of the clarification for terms to see if there was anything for us there. While I was just listening to you, Ardith, though, like it just reminded me of how, you focused on the word holiness and yeah, it's saying that sentence here in this lesson we're reading right now about the holiness of all living things. But yeah, Susan, for whatever it's worth, I guess it just made me feel inclined to pull up this sentence from the text. It says, how holy is the smallest grain of sand when it is being recognized, or when it is recognized as being part of the completed picture of God's Son. So yeah, if we're talking about the holiness, there's no question about that. It doesn't even have to be a living thing, right? For that question about consciousness, about awareness is like I said, kind of something that I've heard some teachers speak to, but I guess for what it's worth, Art and Persa, Gary's teachers, say that animals do have lessons and forgiveness lessons. They can be loving or they can be not loving, and they can be making spiritual progress in this lifetime or not based in that. If that's interesting to you, you can take that in. I think for me, I kind of focus more so on what I'm projecting onto the things than I do. I have that little curiosity about my dog, like I said, but I know that that's really kind of ego distraction. Ultimately, I think it's more so for me in my practice, it's more so about just noticing how I'm feeling towards those things, how I'm seeing them. I know we've got a couple hands raised, though.
Thank you. The grain of sand was very helpful.
Good. I'm glad. And were you going to say something too, Ardith?
Yeah, before I shut up, I just want to say one thing about the what was I going to say? I totally lost it. Oh well, that happens sometimes.
It'll come back.
The whole, yeah, it will. Go ahead. It'll come back.
Yeah, we've
Thanks.
got a couple hands, and so feel free to chime back
Right.
in if you remember
will.
it. But we've got Robert and then Andrew. So go ahead, Robert.
Okay. It was that sentence that got me. First of all, yeah, it's all very interesting what you guys said in the attempt to get some understanding of all these things, what a living thing is and what holy is. And that's sort of my perspective too, but I'll just do mine, and if there's any opportunity or whatever, comment on what you all said. But the same sentence, I begin to understand the holiness of all living things, including myself, and their oneness with me. That gets with Ardith, the others, the oneness being what holiness means too. There's a sense in which it means oneness, and I certainly agree with that. But the idea that I thought this was very revealing about, to begin to understand, right in the beginning when I started the course, to understand what the word holy refers to in the course. And this lesson gives us one idea, that it means that my mind is part of God's. I am holy because my mind is part of God's. And of course, since my mind is what I am, then I am part of God. And of course, the Course says this over and over again. So that my mind is part of God's, and other places, my mind is in God's mind. It is one with God's mind. So it's all those kinds of things. So in reality, and I notice how this lesson is moving to a very deep level, moving from, the previous lesson about the idea of peace. And then I begin to understand, I start getting deeper, is what he's doing here, to finally realize this overall universal oneness. And so to the idea that in reality, my mind and will are one with God's. And as a pure mind, as he created me, which the Course says in other places, I think and will with God. And, the primary prime creator. And of course, I am aware of the thought that I think and will with him. And this brings joy. The Course talks about that all the time, like every thought I have, that level 2 at least brings either peace or war, either love or fear. But here at level 1, my thinking and willing with God, the mind of God, this brings joy, and it maintains the perfect happiness of the kingdom, which the Course mentions over and over again, including that God's will for me is perfect happiness. And we all share that, right? That's one thing, it's sort of the spiritual level of experience. Then one thing at this level, this reminded me of something that I've been practicing lately, where there's another lesson, I think it's coming up, that says, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. And I've been experiencing some upset. It started a couple months ago with the heat pump of my neighbor's upstairs heat pump. It's right outside my bedroom window. And of course, when it goes on, it's pretty loud. And we were trying to use earplugs and different things. What do they call it? Some kind of noise, good noise and all that. And finally, I decided to use this lesson. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. And it's like, okay, like Jesus says, test it, see if it works. And so I lay there and I would say to myself, my holiness can protect me from having any negative reactions to the sound of that heat pump. And I will share with you that heat pump has not bothered us since. And that's the truth. But anyway, the first thing I talked about was the spiritual level of the mind's experience. And I have a confession to make. I must admit, though, that I only think of my spiritual nature between meals. That's it.
Robert, you said so many really helpful things, I felt just now. So thank you very much for that. I really love that example of how you got to prove it to yourself, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
I was
great
happy
example.
too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And you started by just talking about what it even means to be holy and how this lesson title really is defining that for us. You know, being part of God is what I'm holy. I was just like listening to you and reflecting on how lately in my practice there's something getting shifted in my thinking around the word love and what does love mean, and understanding really the oneness with God is love and is holy, like you were defining for us right now. So I was just feeling very connected to what you were sharing. So thank you for your shares.
Okay, you're welcome.
And Andrew.
Thank you. I'd like to get back to the animals a little bit because, well, I don't have pets, but I spend a lot of time at a wetland nearby where I volunteer giving tours to people. And we see a lot of animals, wild animals, and the struggle for survival that they have to do. We were always seeing animals getting eaten and torn apart or swallowed whole, and that, it's not a pretty sight sometimes, but it's nature, and I have to believe that they're suffering when I see something like that happen. But this is a world of perception. It's not the real world, but they are somehow part of the whole illusion that we made, and they're alive. I mean, everything, even a grain of sand, has life because there's actually energy in a single molecule. It's constantly moving. So we have to somehow separate the world of illusion, the world that we see, of perception, the world of perception, and try to just realize that it is. I didn't make it by myself. My ego didn't make this whole world, but our collective mind made this world, made every little part of it, down to the tiny particles, and we share it, and we're all connected somehow. But it's I'm starting to ramble, but it's confusing, and we have to just remember to separate what we perceive and realize it's not reality. It's not our true nature, our true self. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then I would just add, I guess I added my own practice, just ask for help then on how to see it different. Like just acknowledge that, yep, this is how I see it right now. Well, I was listening to you, Andrew, talk about like well, how it's not always pretty, right? Like there's this one's eating the other, and there's pain. You said you can't imagine that there's no suffering there. As I was listening to you, I was thinking how it's no different, right? When you're watching the news and you bring those questions up sometimes about seeing people in the news and seeing the suffering that's going on there, right? Like you see it in the animal kingdom too, like same idea, but your return to just reminding yourself that this isn't what it really is. It's just really you practicing the whole remember what everything's for. So I think you got yourself right back to it. Ardith, yes, you want to say something?
I think I just remembered what I was going to say before, but I really appreciate everything. I'm listening very carefully. I can't find disagreements, so I guess we're all over the board, but there's somehow it all plugs in together. What I was going to say before was I think it would help all of us, I know it does for me anyway, to keep in mind that the egoic environment that we find ourselves in, this general egoic environment, is consciousness. That's the way it's stated. There's a difference, a very distinct difference between consciousness and awareness. And I think by having every living thing included in oneness and equating it with awareness in its fullest sense, that's when it really becomes clear as to what it is. I say somewhere in the Course, I'm sorry, I'm not the scholar, so I really don't know, but somewhere it does say that right before we get out of the happy dream, or right before we're going to come into the full awareness, we get like a flash, and we understand everything. Now, how animals and plants and all the rest of it will, quote, understand, it won't be necessarily in our form, but it all comes out of this consciousness, this way that we perceive. And when awareness is without perception, it's just instantaneous. It just is. And we know it is because we're in it and we are it. And that's another thing too. Somewhere it says, you're not the king. You're not in the kingdom of heaven. You are the kingdom of heaven. And all this, I know I'm rambling now too, as usual. But anyway, it all kind of, to me, it boils down to oneness and where we are now, and realize that we're in a perception realm. And when we're not anymore, we will have a full knowledge, and all of this will just be an awareness. It will just be is. There won't be any questions. The Alpha and Omega will be one. And meanwhile, all we do is love one another to the nth degree, including the animals and the birds and the flowers and all the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was while I was listening to you first start to say that, I was thinking to myself, if someone asked me to define the difference between those terms, I don't know that I would have had an answer, but I appreciated listening to you differentiate them just now. So thank you. And Susan raised her hand.
Yes, just what you said, Maggie. Ardith, having been a long time transcendental meditationist, in that family, the word consciousness and awareness are used interchangeably. And to hear you define consciousness as the way we perceive and awareness is the knowing, just deep knowing. I can tell you that TM's version is the deep knowing, applies to both. But so this helps me with my ACIM dictionary in terms of being able to speak different languages correctly. So thank you for that, because now I understand more clearly the difference of what's intended in the meaning of these symbols that we're trying to use, right? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Susan. And Ardith, you can go ahead.
May I just respond to Susan quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of, I didn't know that much about TM, but hearing that, it makes sense. There, from what I can understand and feel, and again, scholars of the Course will come forward, please correct any time. But I just think that there are elements of awareness that do come into our consciousness, but they're so rapid, so fast, they don't stick. And so the main way that we understand and perceive is through consciousness. This is the environment. And we will all prefer to be in full awareness all times, I know, but apparently in this particular stage we're in, it's not doable. So I really respect other systems that recognize there are those elements that can interchange, but I think if we understand where we are, it helps us, get sea legs. It's not so bad to realize that this is something that we are in actuality, and is not fullness. And then we're not so hard on ourselves when we realize that this is something that we have to work together. That's the important thing, together on, to recognize our misperceptions. And this brings us closer and closer to that full awareness. At least that's how I'm feeling it right now. May change tomorrow. I appreciate your input, Susan, and anybody else's too, about this particular area, because it is very important, I think, especially on a day-to-day basis when we struggle to try to understand exactly what we are thinking and how we're to take our next steps. Thanks.
Yes. Well said. Thank you very much. Again, I'm just like soaking that in right now. That felt very helpful for me currently. So I thank you both. Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, a couple quick things on this issue about use of words. I just thought I would share a few things. Like Arden's pointing out at the Course points out that this Course remains within the ego framework and implies that that's consciousness, the awareness versus consciousness. And I would share just one of the quotes from the text. I don't know where it is. It's just in my memory, where the Course says that consciousness was the first split introduced into the mind after the separation. And I think that points to the difference between consciousness and awareness, where awareness, we're all directly aware of that. Don't mean the pun, but awareness is just the way we be. It's part of it. I doubt there's any existence without awareness. As a matter of fact, I think the Course even says that. Whereas consciousness is the idea of knowing with or being aware with something. And so since we have the split mind, consciousness is the idea that you're aware of something with the ego or with the Holy Spirit. And so you have the choice of accepting one as what you want to believe. The other thing I would say that is that as far as use of the word experience, the Course is talking a lot about experience. And in one place, at least, the way I think he uses the word experience is awareness and feeling. One of the lessons he says, we are trying to bring to you a new experience, a new awareness and feeling, as if he would substitute those two words for the word experience.
Mm.
So anyway, that's all made sense to me anyway. I thought I'd share that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, very relevant. Thank you. I appreciate all of that as well. And that has caused Susan to raise her hand again. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is very exciting, Robert. Really exciting, because what comes to mind is then the unsplit awareness is really the home of non-duality. And after the split, then we go into these states of consciousness. I loved what you said about of being aware with something. So there you have the with being the duality. So thank you for that. You just made my day.
You're welcome.
Beautiful. I feel like there's a lot of
Can I just say something to add to the idea?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Very quickly, when you said that the awareness is something that would be part of the non-duality, which is okay, I would say, yeah, that's true. That awareness is part, it's an aspect, it's applicable to our mind as God created it. That mind is aware.
Yes, as a way of being, as it just is.
Well, I'm afraid that you and I have a metaphysical difference I'm picking up.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, I think you got a feeling that there's only numerically one thing in reality.
Yeah, the pure non-duality, right? There's sometimes
Yes.
this discrepancy within the Course students. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Do you want to share your perspective, Robert?
Yeah, to me, there are infinite number of sons of God, but they're all one in nature.
That's the non-duality.
Nature. They're the same kind of thing, namely a mind with the same attributes, knowledge, power, including awareness, love, and etc. To an equal degree. So there's no difference between us. We all have the same attributes to an equal degree. And we're the same kind of thing. We're mind just like God, because God created us like himself. And we too have the function of creating, which is very clear in the Course. So when I say that awareness is it's something that's inherent to a mind. I mean, you can't have a mind without being aware. That's what it means to, one of the things it means to be a mind. And of course, other terms that the Course uses, which I could talk about more later, but I don't want to take up all kinds of time. But also included to that, the Course at least has us use the word thinking and willing and being aware and feeling. Those are all part of our nature as he created us. Those words would apply to that. And of course, they apply here too. But And so I don't know. That's enough.
Yeah,
Well,
no.
thank you. That feels, I don't feel anything that doesn't agree with. I didn't hear, sense,
Okay,
or
that's
feel.
good. It's just that, yeah, okay. I don't want to make a disagreement. That's for sure.
Well, you know what? I'll check back with you in a year. We'll see how I understand things in a year, and maybe I'll
Okay.
understand more
Well,
what it is
Let me say
you're
something.
finding different.
Are you on the written Let's Discuss? You know, where you post?
Like the Facebook group, he means.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you
I
know,
don't post.
I have a lot of posts that if you went to my page on this issue, you know, if you wanted to read those, actually, if
Okay.
you come back.
All right. Thanks. I don't want to take everybody's time with this. Thank you. But I'm all in on the non-duality part.
Well, I don't know what you mean by non-duality.
I think, like, honestly, while I was listening to the two of you too, I felt it too, like Susan said. I think there's a lot in common in what's being expressed there, and certainly a lot of like plenty of room for us to be able to share about our individual practices and how we're sensing, what's being taught to us through the course. But yeah, I think you're not taking up anybody else's time in a way that's inappropriate at all. I'm sure that there's benefit if the two of you are talking about that right now. I trust that there's benefit for all. But I do see Ardith is waiting patiently, so I'm going to call on Ardith.
People are going to get really sick of this little round, but that's okay. I just dawned on me as I was listening to you talk that the awareness is the bottom line. Awareness is, it is what it is. I mean, it's like when it says you stop talking at some point, God is. That's all you can say anymore. It is. And there's no perception about it, nothing. It just is. And we know that this is true because elsewhere in the Course it tells us that God, we'd say the source itself, knows, quote, quote, nothing about this world. Why? Because it's an illusion. That's why in the Bible even says, Jesus says, when I leave, I will send you the Holy Spirit. Actually, the Holy Spirit's with us all at all times, but the awareness of its presence is something else again. That connection had to be made because the actual process of the isness can't know and perceive the way we do. It does. This non-duality duality argument has gone on forever within the Course community, probably will be unsolved. It doesn't matter actually, because as we experience these things, it'll come true to us as we know them. But I just think if we remember that there wouldn't be any be or any is, if there were no awareness. So it has to have that as a ground. That has got to be non-dual there. The way we experience this life and the way we have split this mind after the ego split is completely different. We see things in comparisons. Everything is comparison. There's no straight line to anything. And so I feel that myself in my heart because I have had little glimpses, and we do get those glimpses. And some people, truthfully, they do live in a kind of a state of awareness. They teach it right now. And to me, it's a good step. And maybe it's flawed, and I'm just not aware of it. But I don't know. I see that distinction. I think it's helpful to me to keep it, not to keep it separate, but to remember so that I don't chastise myself when I'm not in the is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And I think you make such I guess my favorite point in what you just said is that we each have our own like curriculum learning that's unraveling for us. And so if there is these questions, if there is this confusion, we can kind of trust that it will come to us in the ways that it is meant to as we continue to be willing and ask for that help. So yeah, it certainly can be helpful though. And it is sometimes how some of the things come to us is through these discussions with each other. So thank you all for that.
Thank you.
Yes. Any other thoughts right now on lesson 57, fifth part? We can move on. We do still have enough time if we'd like to move forward into lesson 58. Any final thoughts with 57 though first? All right, let's move forward. Lesson 58, I'm going to share a screen and I'll just go over the 5 lesson titles first. just so we can see if there's anything we'd like to note about this particular collection. So we have first lesson 36, my holiness envelops everything I see. Then lesson 37, my holiness blesses the world. Lesson 38 that Robert was just referencing, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. Lesson 39, my holiness is my salvation. And lesson 40, I am blessed as a son of God. Before we just start from the top, is there anything at all that anyone does feel they'd like to share just about this particular collection? Sometimes people have reactions to that, I know. No, so let's just go right ahead into 36. My holiness envelops everything I see. And let's see here. Lizette, do you mind reading? You're just on mute, just FYI.
Did you say Robert?
Yeah, I was
Oh,
just
no, I'm sorry. I said Lizette. And
sorry, I was going to say, why don't you read, so I'll shut up. I didn't know I was on mute. Sorry, go ahead. It's one of those days.
Shall I read?
Yes, please.
Okay. My holiness envelops everything I see. From my holiness does the perception of the real world come. Having forgiven, I no longer see myself as guilty. I can accept the innocence that is the truth about me. Seen through understanding eyes, the holiness of the world is all I see, for I can picture only the thoughts I hold about myself.
Beautiful. Thank you for reading. Is there anything at all that you would like to share about that?
I think this is what keeps me busy all the time because it's so difficult to understand and to realize in daily life. And what we're all talking about in these get-togethers is often it boils down to this, that we see what we have inside. I think it's really worth practicing awareness about that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I can see that. What you're saying, a lot of it just boils down to just that paragraph right there. Sums so much of it up.
Mhm.
And I think you said this is what you're always working at, or that this is a challenge. Yeah, right. For all
It's
of
a
us.
challenge,
Yes.
yes.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you very much.
So when you see, we were talking about the news and animal life not being that pretty. And then I think it somehow, I can relate to that very much. And I know that somehow it's my own suffering that's coming out and I relate to the suffering of others. So the thing I can do is becoming aware of what my own suffering is about, instead of thinking, how can I do something about the suffering outside? And that's sometimes very puzzling.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because that is really all of it, right? Is to see what seems to be outside, but to remember that it's really just a picture of an inward condition.
Yes.
Very puzzling to the ego, right? It really doesn't get that or like that or want us to get that. Yeah.
On the other hand, it's the only thing we can do.
Right.
And
right.
do the work, like Byron Katie said, do the work, for instance, or other things, but to understand ourselves better and to leave, to cleansing. A cleansing is it? It's a cleansing.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And I think you're
Thank
making
you.
me think, you're welcome. I love what you're saying, because you're making me think about how Jesus points out to us in so many places throughout the course that what we are projecting out, what we're seeing on our brothers or on the animals, it could be on animals too, right? But that's how we get to see what we really are thinking and feeling about ourselves. And if it didn't get projected out, we would just really be like, what would we do? We'd be just lost. So to be able to recognize that the work, as you put it, is to just notice those things, just notice it, because here it is visible for me. And now I can do something about it. Now I can ask for help with it. So, well, thank you. Thank you very much for that share.
Welcome.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Yes. For two things. First of all, my experience with the my holiness envelops everything I see. For some reason, I just can't explain it. But the first year I took was taking these lessons, 1982 or 83, I forget which one now. I'm coming back from the restaurant and I decide, oh, I think I'll do my lesson. I'm just getting used to this, try to think to remember. And I'm walking by a gas station. And it's like, okay, I looked at the gas pumps and my holiness envelops those gas pumps. That's all I can say about that. Just remember that all the time, I guess, because it was the first time in this idea that my holiness envelops things. It's like an envelope. And so in a way, my mind being part of God envelops everything because everything is in my mind, right? So naturally my mind envelops it. The other thing is I was always, for some reason, I was reminded just now as we went through this whole idea, like in the second sentence, I no longer see myself as guilty. I can accept the innocence that is the truth in me. Now that has its content, but then moving on right at the end, for I can picture only the thoughts I hold about myself. Now it could be thoughts of guilty or thought of innocence, but he's ultimately getting to the previous one too, in a sense. And it reminded me of the statement in the text where it says, every response you make is determined by what you think you are, but what you want to be is what you think you are. Now that's an interesting thought in itself. What you want to be is what you think you are. Therefore, what you want to be determines every response you make. And that would include your response to all the sense data that is entering your mind through the body's senses, and that you interpret, and then that interpretation or that thought is projected out and you actually see that in the sense data. But anyway, I thought I would share that. It was meaningful to me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Robert. And it's meaningful to me while I was listening to you. This is something I could say, doing the work I do as a therapist and working with people in, what they're experiencing in the level of form. This very much gets verified for me in that practice with folks all the time, what you were talking about exactly just now, Robert. And that final part of this that we just read, that I can picture only the thoughts I hold about myself, that truth is really found in the psychotherapy world, even if you're far from folks talking about the course. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. So
yeah. I guess you really like the pamphlet too, huh?
Yes, the psychotherapy pamphlet is, of course, quite intriguing to me in my job.
I guess so.
Yes. Well, everyone, I'm seeing the time and I am mindful of it. I am moving on to another meeting right after this one. So I am going to start to wrap us up right now. So we will start next week, right where we've left off. Our starting point will be lesson 58, part 2. And before we sign off, I do have a little prayer. If you'd like to close your eyes, whatever feels comfortable for you. This is one of my favorite prayers, and it is from Workbook lesson 189. Father, we do not know the way to you, but we have called and you have answered us. We will not interfere. Salvation's ways are not our own, for they belong to you. and it is unto you we look for them. Our hands are open to receive your gifts. We have no thoughts we think apart from you, and cherish no beliefs of what we are or who created us. Yours is the way that we would find and follow. And we ask but that your will, which is our own as well, be done in us and in the world, that it becomes a part of heaven now. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much,
Maggie,
Maggie.
so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Really
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
all of you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.